Hello and welcome to HFMA Talk, the podcast for NHS Finance. I'm Mark Orchard, Chief Financial Officer at Portsmouth Hospital's University NHS Trust. This episode continues our series of conversations where I get to talk to some of my current and former NHS colleagues working across all sectors and geographies right across the UK and beyond. If you're enjoying listening to this new series so far, you'd be doing me a great favour if you're able to spread the word amongst your colleagues and friends, and also on your social media platforms. And most importantly, please do remember to hit the subscribe button on your podcast app to subscribe to HFMA Talk so that you never miss an episode. And today is a special one, as I have the privilege to be joined by Professor Alan Brace, who just a few weeks ago now retired from the most senior financial role within the NHS in Wales, having spent almost 5 years as Director of Finance for the Department of Health and Social Care within the Welsh Government. Alan, welcome. How are you today? And how has the first few weeks of retirement been for you?
Afternoon, Mark, and lovely to see you again. And thanks very much for the invite. It's very strange. I got that mixed feeling of probably still feeling like I'm on holiday. And the holiday just keeps going on every week. So it's very strange. You go from 100 miles an hour job, which I guess we all do, don't we? Full diary, to actually just having all of the time to yourself, but particularly enjoying it this week with the nice weather. So starting to settle in quietly to life in retirement and just gradually slowing down, I guess.
Right, I say you've got so much to talk about. And given that you've recently retired, Alan, I thought it was only right that we took a bit of a look back approach, a bit of a this is your life approach to this one, if that's all right. The year is 1961. You were born in the Rhondda Valley, which of course is a former coal mining area in South Wales. So first up, tell me a bit more about your roots.
I'm probably a child of the 60s and 70s, Mark. Probably don't like to remind myself of that too often now. It feels such a long time ago. But yeah, a typical valley village upbringing, really. My dad was a coal miner. The whole family were a coal mining family. My mother stayed at home, brought the children up. Everybody knew each other, all went to school together, played together, socialised together. Normal village life, full of characters. I had a really happy childhood. Enjoyed everything about it, enjoyed school, played rugby for the school, played rugby for the village, all of the usual things. And yeah, probably a bit then, Mark, that probably stayed with me through my career, really. You probably, as you get older, realise probably a lot of the values that you're brought up within in a community like that. But also sort of the importance of public services. I hadn't realised sort of how much sort of health and education were really prized in some of these sort of village communities, really. And probably in some sort of subconscious way is probably why I ended up in health, really, and probably why I ended up wanting to stay in Wales. So
you went to the local comprehensive, and then you graduated from University of Wales, Cardiff, is that right?
Yeah, it was interesting, Mark. I suppose then there wasn't really the careers advice you get now, so most of the advice was do well at school and that'll give you an opportunity to go to university. And then when it came to sort of what to do at university, the advice was do something you enjoy. And just the fact that you get a degree, you'll get a job. So I enjoyed history, so I decided to do history in Cardiff. But then that was probably late 70s, early 80s, and the world changed quite markedly. I think it's suddenly become more about sort of relevance of degrees and particularly it was interesting sort of how much things like business studies and accountancy, even in the 3 years I was in Cardiff, suddenly came to the fore when it came to graduate recruitment exercises. And probably one of the reasons I decided that, given my degree, probably teaching was the next step. So I went into teacher training in London, of all places, which was a far cry from sort of my life in the valleys and in Cardiff. But didn't enjoy it at all. It was at a time when I think a lot of teachers were leaving the profession to train again. And I think the educational system was so different from what I was used to. So I think it was then I realised that I needed some additional qualification. Law was the next. Interestingly, it wasn't accountancy, it was law. I just thought that was probably something that I would enjoy more, but you had to do 2 years in law school. You had to pay for one of those years yourself. I had no money, my parents had no money. So then the next option was accountancy, and I started to look around at accountancy training schemes. Applied for quite a few, including the NHS, the National Audit Office, local government. Got interviews for all of them, got through the first round of interviews for all of them. And the NHS in Wales came up as the second interview. And I don't know what it was, preparing for that interview, going through the process, being offered a place on the graduate training programme in Wales. Suddenly I just thought, this suddenly felt right for the first time. Up until that time, I was probably just drifting without any real sort of structure or good advice. And all of a sudden, this felt like something that probably felt right. So that's how I ended up in the Welsh NHS, really by accident. Probably more of a lemony snicket series of unfortunate events than a well thought out career path, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, national finance trainee for the Welsh office, and then you qualified, I think, around about 1987, age 26. I understand then you spent the next couple of years in local government gaining experience before you then went actually back into the NHS. Is that right?
Yeah, I started, although it was a Welsh office training scheme, Mark, we were placed in the old health authorities, again showing my age. So I was within one of the bigger ones, which was actually my home patch, Midglamorgan Health Authority. And I started with the Cook's Tour in Bridgend General Hospital, is where I met my wife. So quite sort of influential in my life in a number of ways, really. But I really loved the operational buzz of working in a hospital. I did a weekend in A&E. I was a porter for the week. I just did so many different jobs and I just loved it. Yeah. Then I went into finance, and in the old sort of training scheme, it was you really got to start at the transactional end. So I did 12 weeks in payroll, calculating bonus payments for ancillary staff, and the contrast between the buzz of a weekend in A&E with calculating bonus payments in a remote treasurer's department was almost sort of, at that stage, I just thought, well, I'll get my accountancy qualification, but I'm going to go into general management because that looks a lot more interesting. So when I qualified, it was the usual, process at the time. There was a job earmarked for you, which then was the old Scale 9, which there was only 3 in the health authority, and one was earmarked for the trainee. The others were sort of for seasoned individuals who'd sort of worked hard to get there. So I went from being a popular trainee, which everybody had time for, to suddenly being the most hated person in the health authority, being given a rapid promotion to a job that everybody believed I couldn't do. So it was at that point I just thought, well, I wouldn't mind trying something else. So I again applied for a ridiculously senior job in local government. Got interviewed for it and bizarrely got appointed. Probably completely incapable of doing it, but learned quickly. I had quite an interesting 2 years, actually, but I always knew I was coming back to health, so it was one of those. And during the training scheme, Mark, I was advised that if you want to be, well, a treasurer it was called then, rather than a director of finance, you had to move every 2 years, and unfortunately I took it literally. So I just thought I'm going to move sort of 2 years in local government and then I'll move. And for the sort of very early part of my career, I literally moved every 2 years. So I went, it was at the time then when the internal market was, GP fund holding was coming into health. Trusts were on the sort of horizon for organisations. So I decided that felt like a good time to get back into health. So I took a job as the deputy unit accountant of an organisation that was going into trust. And I did all of the work then with fund holding, setting up clinical directors, giving clinicians their budgets. So it just felt like work. For the first time, really connecting finance with the service, probably for the most enjoyable part to date of my career at that stage, because it felt like working a lot with clinicians, translating finance into service and service into finance. So a lovely connection and a great job to sort of get back into.
And then what I'm looking at your CV in front of me, Alan, and you then went on to become finance director, I believe, at Rhondda NHS Trust, age 32. And then what's really struck me then was you spent the next sort of 8 years or so in 3 finance director roles, all within your homeland, if I put it that way. You're at Rhondda NHS Trust as finance director. Then you went and some of these, of course, changed boundaries and names and so on, I'm sure. But East Glamorgan NHS Trust, and then Pontypridd and Rhondda NHS Trust. I wondered if there was something deliberate about that in terms of and how that felt really to step into a finance director role and to continue on that phase of your development in your home patch.
Yeah, definitely, Mark, there was something, particularly the Rhondda Trust, 2 opportunities for me, really. I mean, to work in a trust, but to work in a trust on your home patch, you know, with friends, family, community, where you were brought up, was felt like a unique opportunity. I mean, there was a lot of experienced people going for the job, so I was probably the very least experienced on the shortlist, so I didn't really have a huge expectation of getting it. But I did. And that probably, there's a couple of things I think then that sort of really made a difference. One, I probably had a lot of learning to do very early, but there were 30 trusts in Wales then with a lot of experienced finance directors that I could just watch and learn from. The trust, and it's probably a valley thing in Wales, but people always want to give back to their valleys. So a lot of the non-executive directors were very successful people. And it was at the time when they were smaller boards in Wales then. I mean, they're much larger now with the big organisations, but there were sort of just 4 non-executive directors, but they were 4 highly successful people. And I just learned a huge amount from them, So I probably ended up in a really lucky position, being the finance director of a patch I knew inside out. I knew the communities, I knew the people. My first meeting with the trade unions, one of the trade union reps said, I'm your father's cousin. So immediately, and then I realised that a lot of people working there I was in school with. So there was just something that for the first job, everything sort of seemed to come together really nicely. And that first 12 months was really hairy because I probably didn't have the experience for the role. But after that, I think I just sort of settled well, learned a lot, learned quickly. Unfortunately, then got into this 2-year cycle. So I then decided I needed to move again. So I then moved to East Glamorgan Trust, but it was a bigger role. It was sort of running contracting, information, IT, deputy chief executive. So again, in a very short period of time, I sort of took a lot of additional responsibilities on, which again, I loved, I enjoyed. And one of the things, Mark, that I think I learned from sort of rapidly moving through a lot of different organisations, and probably something that a lot of people don't get so much anymore, is so very different cultures, very different leadership styles.
Sure.
And, going from one of the organisations that was very much sort of into that more macho culture, long hours, really aggressive on performance, to East Glamorgan Trust, where I always remember on my first Friday, at about sort of 4:30, the chief exec came in and just asked me what I'm still doing there. She said, "You've got a family, you should be going home for the weekend." And it was a bit like, well, it's only 4:30. It was, I've probably got a good few hours left yet. And it was refreshing. But she was a highly successful chief exec. And you just start to realise that, there are probably cultures and styles that you were more comfortable with. But there's more than one way of doing things successfully and running a successful organisation. So working in different organisations and seeing different things, I just think give me a foundation that I probably appreciated more in later life, and particularly setting up the Finance Academy and some of the other things. I drew on a lot of my early experiences, but I didn't realise it at the time.
But I say, I come back to the thing that struck me about your CV was that actually you're in the same sort of general patch, because you then next moved on to Pontypridd and Rhondda.
And it was interesting, Mark, because in the year before the mergers in '99, I think it was, I was the chair of the Wales Finance Directors. So I was chairing a group of 30 people that was about to go down to 15, and I was one of them. I was probably in that unusual position that the two organisations that were gonna merge were the two that I'd been the finance director for. So, it was one of those, if you didn't get it, there was probably going to be some serious embarrassment. But yeah, it was a fascinating process, really, and having to lead all of the trust by being chair of the All Wales Finance Directors meet every month, and it's where most of the business in Wales has traditionally got done. So being chair of it is quite a sort of privilege and an influential position for the 12 months you do it. But to do it when you could see around the table that there were 30 colleagues who were about to go down to 15, and all of the sort of impact that would have on the finance community was a great experience, but a sobering one. I was one of the lucky ones to come out the other side, and Pontypridd and Rhondda was the new organisation. And again, I carried on as Deputy Chief Exec, Finance Director, Contracting, IT, Information, procurement, a whole raft of sort of things added to your portfolio. But great times, again, a lot of continuity in the leadership team, bigger organisation, a new hospital to commission in Morgan.
Yeah.
And that probably, Mark, was the downside of serving your own community is you've got to put up with friends and family telling you how to run the organisation better and where the NHS fails. So you've got to prepare that every weekend somebody's going to tell you that you're doing a bad job and you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. But the other one was just professionally knowing that you're opening a brand new facility that's going to be great, but you're shutting quite a lot of hospitals. And there was a lot of small hospitals in the Rhondda that were paid for by miners' pennies. It was miners sort of put a penny in a week to build a hospital. So from a mining family, having to go to big community events, where 150 people would turn out protesting against closures, and have to stand up, in front of your own sort of community, and probably for them defend the indefensible, but for you professionally, knowing that modern medicine requires modern facilities. It was, it was great because I could relate to them. I knew exactly where they were coming from, but really tough job to do when you're from the patch that, people think you're taking something away from them.
So you were, I think in the latter period of Pontypridd and Rhondda, you were acting chief exec, but then you went on to, you moved westward then, in terms of your commute at least, to take on the chief exec role of Carmarthenshire Local Health Board. So, very much a step up. You're in your early 40s at this point, Alan. So how was that from a step up perspective? How did you find that transition?
Yeah, and some reflections, I guess, Mark. One of the things that, obviously by the time Pontypridd and Rhondda had come along, that was my third finance director job with a load of other things added in. I had done a period covering for the chief exec there. She'd gone on to cover the regional director's role. And it was expected that I would be a chief exec. And again, it just felt like that you had to make progress. But I don't know if I ever really had my heart in it, in the sense that I really wanted it. But it was at a time when they created 22 local health boards to do population health commission in primary care. I was approached to have a look at the one in West Wales with a strong indication that, that I would apply. The whole process went really quickly. I met the chair and next thing you know, I was chief executive after a very quick interview process and a very tough patch. probably in financial terms, a lot of sort of a legacy of financial deficits, a lot of service change, again with some very difficult communities, hospitals that needed to sort of start to think about how they dealt with emergency and elective surgery differently. So moving services from hospitals, and again sort of, communities feeling that they were losing things. So a very difficult 5 years in a very difficult patch. But probably in hindsight, one of the career-wise and experience-wise, one of the best things I did.
Sure.
But I didn't enjoy it. And the world of chief execs is very different from the world of finance directors. Although, whether it was a difficult contractor meeting where we'd slug it out or we'd argue over things, there was a strong sense of a network and community in finance. Yeah. And every month you'd come together, we knew each other, we almost grew up together. It was just a lovely, safe environment. The world of chief execs, very, very different. And not the same sense of network or community, and it felt at times quite a lonely, isolated role. Great to actually chair to lead an executive team, because it probably, and I had a really excellent finance director, but I could almost hear myself being played out in front of me. And then a medical director who probably had a different view, and a nurse director who had a different view, and a planning director with a different view. And then I had to calibrate all of this conflicting advice, and often possibly perhaps, go with the medical director rather than the finance director on the issue. But really interesting to watch finance from a very different role. And I think was quite instrumental when I went back into finance then, around some of the early work I did on what a modern finance function could look like, and research, because having watched it for 5 years, and also watched the downside of it, a lot of finance directors slugging it out over difficult negotiations on money when possibly there were bigger issues at play. So you're often just looking at some of the negative aspects sometimes of the world of finance, and possibly thinking that there may be a different way to approach some of that.
So I want to get on to your most recent role in a second, but before I do, the next place I'd like to just take a little pause, if we may, is where I really got to hear about you proper, which was an Aaron Bevan, University Health Board Finance Director. And then you won the HFMA Finance Director of the Year Award 2014. Tell me a bit about that role, because I'm intrigued, because you did a lot in that role. It was a bigger patch than it'd been before because of mergers and so on.
Yeah, hugely, Mark. And I'd arrived there briefly before the new organisations kicked off as the interim director of finance for Gwent Trust. So right. I was on the patch just covering the finance director's role, which was probably my transition back into finance, so where I wanted to get back to. I didn't really want to be a chief exec anymore. And I was lucky. I got interviewed, and it was a fascinating process, because we're only a country of 3 million, Mark, you know that, and very small, but we had 42 organisations that were about to go down to 7 big health boards, and the trusts, there were 3 trusts that were going to be left unaffected. So this was a big change. So you imagine 42 finance directors all going through a process. I think 4 of us emerged the other side. I was fortunate to be one of them, and I was appointed to an Aaron Bevan. And it was fairly, pretty much a new board, so a new chief exec, new chair, new non-executive directors, mostly people from outside Gwent, so I wasn't alone. A number of sort of LHB chief execs. There were 4 of us on the board, all in different roles, so we'd all come from the old LHB structure, but different sort of patches. It was at the time when the decision was made around sort of austerity that health would be on flat cash in Wales and local government would be protected. So we went from this exciting opportunity for an organisation that would be population health focused, would work in an integrated care. So we run integrated care systems. We would run everything from community pharmacy all the way up to specialist services. You literally had everything. A new board, all excited to make a difference, and a prospect of no money. So the £1 billion that we had was going to be the same £1 billion that we would have to deal with for the foreseeable future. So, that was quite an influential time for me, Mark, because I think the board didn't, particularly the non-exec directors and the chair, but I think it was true of the executive directors. None of us turned up to salami slice the NHS in Gwent and just take money out of it. We all wanted to do the best we could for the community, drive quality and safety, but live within the money, have a financial discipline. That was equally important, but not do it in a way that damaged services. And I think that started me on the path that led to value-based healthcare. It allowed me to do a lot of work running up to the formation, because we had 6 organisations going into one. There were 6 finance directors. None of us knew who was going to get the job. So we decided that we would work together, do as much research as we could, talk to as many people, and design a finance structure between us that we thought would reflect the best evidence. And that was probably, again, some of the work that led to the Finance Academy. So those early years in that role probably helped me think around some of all of the other developments that I probably ended up most proud of. But probably the turning point, Mark, it was David Sislin was the Director General in Welsh Government. It was December 2011 from memory, so I hadn't been doing the job long. Andrew Goodall was chairing a meeting in Neville Hall Hospital. You probably remember that as well.
Neville Hall well. Yeah.
And actually, I think now knowing that you were born in Royal Gwent, we'll probably put one of those blue plaques in there to commemorate that this is where Mark Orchard was born. But I remember Andrew getting called out to take a call from David Sislin. He was gone a while. I remember him coming back into the meeting. We finished the meeting. It was literally about to break up for Christmas. He asked to see me after the meeting. He took me to a side room. And one of those moments when you just think, what have I done? Who have I upset? I don't think I've done anything wrong, but I must have. Andrew was really serious, but basically just said that David Sislin had approached me. There was a gap in Welsh Government. The finance director had left, and he wanted me to come in and cover. And he wanted me to come in straight after Christmas. So I literally, and it was for 3 months. So I literally, I don't think I had a choice, but I said, okay. Went home for Christmas and started then in this role in Welsh Government. Fascinating experience. Government is such a different world from the NHS, but the role in Welsh Government is you're also professional head of finance for NHS Wales. So you've literally got both strategy, policy responsibilities to the Minister, but operational, financial performance management and delivery in the NHS and professional standards. So the 3 months became 6 months, 6 months became 9. I wanted to desperately go back to an Iron Bevan. I didn't feel like I'd there was a lot of unfinished business for me that I wanted to see through. But I saw NHS Wales through a very different lens for almost 12 months. And generally, Mark, and this was probably the most sobering bit for me, I could see that the finance community was just desperately struggling, probably still approaching things in the way that they traditionally had, but none of it working anymore. Big organisations having to save serious money whilst delivering performance, changing services. And you could just see that the finance, and finance is a profession, are generally got a very strong work ethic, work exceptionally long hours, are used to delivering results quickly, are often in monthly cycles, annual cycles. And you could just see that none of the old tools and techniques and approaches were working anymore. And I could see a lot of that across Wales. I could equally see, because we were in this role, I've got to sit on all of the finance directors' appointments in Wales. And for the first time, there was no Welsh people on any shortlists. which was fascinating because we had gone from most finance directors growing up in Wales and eventually sort of coming through to actually nobody making a shortlist, probably people not looking to apply, and all of a sudden the finance director's role starting to look like a job that nobody wanted. And again, a lot of that was quite instrumental for me in terms of setting up the Finance Academy. And I remember in September where we have the Welsh HFMA conference, and in the role that I've left, you always do the keynotes starting talk. And I decided that we needed to do something about finance development. So I did a presentation saying that our talent pipeline had become disconnected. You know, some of our approaches were no longer working and relevant, and we needed to do something different. And I remember as the last slide was, we need to set up something like a finance faculty or a finance academy. And I remember a load of questions from the audience saying, what's a finance academy? And one of those, Mark, where I had absolutely no idea other than some broad ideas in my head. But that was the start then of a process. And I was determined to get it going before I went back to an Iron Bevan so we could start to sort of build it. And I was lucky then I went back to an Iron Bevan. It led to me going over to Harvard to look at sort of the work over there and then the value-based healthcare. And I was the team then, without me knowing, Mark, put me in for the HFMA Awards. Like you said, nobody from Wales had ever won it, so I didn't have any expectations at all. And was, just thrilled then when I did win it. And not for me, really, I think more as a recognition for the team and for Wales, really. It felt like a nice moment in time when the finance community were under so much pressure and stress and morale was quite low that, at least we could sort of lift our heads and sort of, do something more that felt like the UK sort of recognising something in Wales.
Absolutely. And so, Alan, thank you for that. And you then went back, of course, subsequently to the in the substantive role of Director of Finance, head of profession for the NHS in Wales, for the Department of Health and Social Care within the Welsh Government, and then continued that development and continued that work that you'd launched there around the Finance Academy in Wales and the Finance Delivery Unit. Can you, for the people on this listening to this podcast, particularly outside of Wales, Alan, who would be less familiar with those two things, can you just unpack that a bit more? Because I think those two things in particular, the Academy and the Delivery Unit in Wales, seem so strong, and I feel we've got so much to learn from. Could you just unpack those for the listeners outside of Wales, if that's all right?
And when the job came up in 2016, Mark, and Andrew Goodall, who was my Chief Executive in Iron Bevan, had been appointed as the Director General for Health and Social Care and Chief Exec NHS Wales. So it was a very conscious decision then to apply for it, go through the process, and fortunate to get appointed. And there were a couple of things then that I was just probably quite determined then to really sort of progress quickly. One was value-based healthcare. So, a good opportunity to suddenly do it across Wales. So that was one of the early sort of actions. The Finance Academy had been growing, but this role gave me the opportunity to start to sort of put it on a proper footing. So we suddenly had a team to support it. We'd already been working that there were probably 4 things that we had to pay some real attention to. One was developing our people, but particularly our talent pipelines, and not just for finance directors. We needed to develop multiple pipelines that actually sort of went as deep into the organisations as we could, and to the extent that we wanted to work with universities. So we wanted to make the NHS an attractive place for graduates, apprenticeship offerings, as many offerings as we could for people to come into the NHS. And then once they were in the NHS, is to support them all the way through their career and to make sure that we had real active offerings in everything that we did. So developing our people, developing our talent. We set up the graduate training scheme. It had been dismantled. We got that back up and running. did a lot on our various sort of talent pipelines. So that was one of the work streams. And we subconsciously, Mark, and it's a psychological thing, we tended to tag finance staff development onto the end of the agenda for the monthly finance directors meeting. And having sort of gone through all of the difficult finance issues, there was no energy left really for finance staff development and no time. So I created the Finance Academy board, which I chaired, which actually met separately every month, but was a space that's all we had to do was to talk about finance development and our profession and what our ambition was. And I didn't allow any deputies, so it was very much an expectation the finance directors all pitched up that they would lead some of the work streams and be very visible in their leadership. So of the 4 work streams, all were led by finance directors. So developing our talent, developing our people, excellence in everything that we did. We realised that to add value, we needed to get our transactional bit as slick as we could, so that our routine work was pretty much sort of automated, which gave ourselves a lot more time to do business partnering, driving service change, all of the better decision making stuff. So creating excellence in basic sort of financial disciplines was one of the other work streams. Then obviously partnerships. Wales is a small place, and there's a lot at a government level about small country governance, how public services work together. So we develop relationships obviously between Welsh Government, Wales Audit Office, local government, health, fire and rescue, the police. And we started to realise that each of these fed each other, so we could start rotating staff. So we could take trainees on together and they could rotate between public services. So when they came out the other end, they didn't really have the same barriers that perhaps I'd grown up with, where we didn't understand the world of local government and they didn't understand our world. So developing people who just sort of saw life from different perspectives was a real benefit, as well as having the opportunity to work with people like Wales Audit Office. So we understand their world, they understood our world, and rather than just have the normal set piece audits, there was opportunities outside to have more broader open discussions. So that was another key work stream. And then the last one, we just realised, and the lessons from austerity was, we can't just rest on our laurels. We had to keep pushing for where the next innovation was. So innovation, value-based healthcare became another work stream. And there was no sort of set objectives. It was just freedom to say, where's the best and what does the best look like, whatever it is, and then go and find it and bring it back, and we'll pinch with pride, and then we'll adapt it and Welshify it and we'll use it. And those 4 work streams, Mark, became quite instrumental, I think, in everything that we did. And I think once we got going, I just think it scaled quickly, it grew. And I just think by being open around sharing what we were doing, but learning from others, we just made more and more contacts, and the more you make contacts, the more you realise that all of us are grappling with similar problems, and none of us have got the answers. So it allowed us to learn a lot quicker, I think, as a finance community. And one of the things I wanted to absolutely make this about is that the Finance Academy was all about, it wasn't a Welsh Government thing, it wasn't a finance director's thing, it belonged to every finance professional in Wales, and it was theirs, and our job was to support them, not the other way around. And I hope that that's one of the things we've achieved. The buy-in that we've got is great, and now we're running multiple talent pipelines, we've got cohorts coming through, and the recent finance directors' jobs have gone a lot of them have gone to people from our talent pipeline. So we're starting to see the benefit now, which is nice.
Yeah, fantastic. Alan, the last part of your career, we across the whole of the UK, in fact, across the globe, we faced some significant challenges, and we with the pandemic and so And that must have brought with it some additional challenges in the role that you were in. So just give me a bit of insight in terms of what you were facing during the pandemic, the contribution you played from your role.
Yeah, and probably, Mark, I never thought I'd spend the last year of my career in a global pandemic, but a privilege in many ways to just see the NHS at its very best. And actually, I was due to retire at the end of September last year, but I agreed to stay on. I couldn't, I don't think anybody would walk away from this, would they? So yeah, the financial aspects, particularly, Mark, were really challenging. None of us had experienced any of it, had we? And the thing that we probably knew is that finance couldn't get in the way of dealing with the immediate problems. We had to deal with the pandemic, and the NHS had to sort of be free to do so. But this is public money, and I think, and I guess this is where experience comes in. That there would be questions around the use of public money, financial governance. So what we did, and this is where I think we are lucky as a very small country with just 7 health boards, and we can get all the finance directors together really quickly. So we issued a load of guidance, a load of monitoring returns. We set up a weekly meeting with finance directors. Me and my team met the finance directors every week. We monitored everything, and for the first couple of months, the job was really having a look at the impact and then working at a government level, both in Wales and the UK, to secure the funding. We knew that we had good governance. We paid a lot of attention to it. We got a national counter-fraud service. We got a national internal audit service. So we actually just sort of asked those to have a look at everything we were doing. And if there's fraud, find it. If there are weaknesses in systems, find it. So we actively encouraged early on in the pandemic as much scrutiny as we could. We shared learning. We made sure that where people did some good board governance changes around decision making, that they shared that quickly, and then we looked for good practice. The academy did a lot of work sharing things as rapidly as we could. The finance delivery unit were literally sort of working actively with health boards as well as nationally. So we did all of that, and that sort of gave us a reasonable confidence that we felt in reasonably good shape. We secured the funding for the first quarter of the year, and we knew that we had enough for the second quarter. And then we just focused our attention at a government level on making sure that we had enough money for the rest of the financial year. We allocated that out in the summer, and then we told the health boards to plan on that basis. They all produced plans. The finance delivery unit reviewed them. We done peer-to-peer reviews, so they all sort of subjected themselves quite openly and actively and happily to just each health board sort of being buddied up and looking at each other's plans and challenging each other. And by about September, we just felt we had financial stability, and we were confident in it. Everybody was forecasting that they could live within their means. We knew that we could manage the MEG at a Welsh Government level. We knew we had enough money for PPE, the vaccine programme, and everything else that was being developed at the time. So finance became more sort of straightforward, interestingly enough. But obviously at the start of the pandemic, PPE was a real challenging area. Obviously, all of the finance directors in Wales of the health boards have been finance directors and directors of procurement, including myself.
Yeah.
So Andrew Goodall said, would I lead on PPE? So I worked with the shared services team, and yeah, I'd have to say some hairy early few weeks, fascinating discussions at a UK level. Everybody's really sort of grappling with some wicked issues. We'd gone from the sense that everything should be global supply chains now, just in time, to suddenly seeing global supply chains collapse and just in time not being the right strategy. So, we went quickly to what could we do locally just in case, really. So, having to sort of just rapidly sort of change everything that, your systems, your processes, your beliefs had been sort of geared towards, all of a sudden not working anymore, and having to recreate something different. But yeah, it was difficult, but probably never really saw a weekend. Easter came and went. May bank holidays came and went. It just felt like, up in the morning, work until late in the evening, and that just felt like 7 days a week, every week. But yeah, we then started to sort of get a bit of confidence that we had our sort of our sourcing strategy was delivering. We were building up stock, and we'd work with the military on some of our logistics to tighten up distribution. I chaired a weekly exec meeting of all of the PP exec leads in the boards. We had sort of regular dialogue, and yeah, it was a weekly meeting with the First Minister, weekly meetings with ministers. It was pretty much sort of full on. And nice that actually finance was a little bit more stable. I think it would have been hugely challenging to try and have done PP as well as, if we'd been in real difficulties through finance.
A lot of that will resonate with so many people, all people listening to this podcast from different parts of the UK and in different roles. But those Easter weekends and May bank holidays and so on you just mentioned right back in the beginning of the pandemic, I think we were all feeling the strain in different ways.
And you realise sort of just the human costs of it all as well, as much as, we know it's our jobs, don't we? And we want to do our best for the communities we serve. I just think that public service ethos, I just think in everybody, and, finance people adapted themselves to loads of different roles, didn't they? But also, I think at the time, people were just going through this personally, and they loved one's family members. So, to keep sort of pitching up, working long hours, when people were equally sort of having to deal with personal loss as well, is just a testament, I think, to public sector workers and to the NHS in particular, really. And, what a fantastic sort of workforce we got, and what a fantastic team finance is, actually.
I couldn't agree with you more with those comments. Thank you. Doing these conversations, we like to pose a few what might be seemingly random questions, just for a sort of quick fire instant response. Just gives us a bit of insight into the person, if that's all right. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Not get so worried about the future, Mark. Not get so stressed about work. I've always had a good balance with my family life, but I'd keep reminding myself that work is not the most important thing. It's family, and actually retiring. I don't think I'll ever regret sort of not spending enough time in work, but you will regret not spending time with your family.
Which decade of music do you enjoy the most?
70s, without a doubt. Both me and my wife agree that there is no better decade, and yeah, that's got to be, it had everything, didn't it?
And anything in particular stand out in the 70s?
Just the whole sort of, obviously early 70s for me, Mark, was sort of the T-Rex, the Sweets, and all of that sort of, those bands. And then interestedly towards the end, sort of moving much more into sort of the start of punk and some of the sort of some of the new sort of the new wave music, new romance or whatever it was called. Yeah, so just the contrast really, Mark, for me. Yeah, I love the 70s. Yeah, just and I think probably being a teenager is the sort of the age of discos, which whenever I say that, my kids just look at me now. If I say disco, they just sort of just look disgusted that I even use the word. But yeah, it's just disco music, Mark, wasn't it? And it's your formative years, I think.
Excellent. And my last question in the quickfire round, and you can spend as long as you want on this one, Alan, in terms of your answer. I just wonder what the most proudest moment of your career, looking back.
On reflection, there's a lot of things that I've been hugely fortunate in. So I'd recognise that I've been sort of lucky and blessed in my career, really. I've done some great jobs with some great people. But the things that sort of, I think, stay with me now after retiring are almost the things that you've built, and things like the Finance Academy, the Finance Delivery Unit, Value-Based Healthcare, but also the Royal Glamorgan Hospital. Even simple things like the PFI for the staff residences there, where I drive past now, and you just realise all of those torturous legal negotiations and work that you did. So, yeah, it's the things that you've built that will last. And And probably more importantly, and probably the thing I'm most proud of, is to see so many young finance professionals through the academy just benefiting from your own experience, the good, the bad and the ugly, and just seeing them with confidence coming through. Like I said, a number of them becoming finance directors, and just that sense of leaving things in a better place and things that will make a difference in the future, not just sort of about you or you being around, things that don't require you to be around, that hopefully will bring benefit for a number of years. So last going off, Mark, Wales became a global innovation hub with the World Economic Forum, sort of the only country in 4. Others were sort of more condition-based. And just seeing the opportunity for Wales to develop its work around outcomes, and to know that if we improve outcomes, then friends, family, communities that you're from will all benefit from that, is quite a nice sort of thought, I think, that actually not just making a difference to things finance related, that actually you can impact on services, which sometimes feels a little bit hard when you're working in a difficult financial world and a financial discipline, really. And to think that actually you can, through some other work, make a real difference in everything from cardiovascular care to diabetic care, etc., is quite a nice feeling, really.
Yeah. Fantastic. Alan, so give us a feel of what's next for you then. So you've retired now, you're presumably going to spend a bit more time with the family and so on, but you've got many years ahead of you, Alan. So what's your plan?
Shed lockdown pounds in the gym, Mark, has got to be the early priority. I said I wanted to have the summer off. That was quite deliberate. A lot of people advised me that always retire in the summer, which I think was good advice. So I was determined to take the summer off. And one of the things I sort of said, really, Mark, is I want to spend a lot more time with the family and perhaps travel when time allows. But finance is a difficult world, and you've got to knock a lot of square pegs into round holes often. So I didn't really want to do any more of that. But work that was more about doing interesting things with interesting people, and like you said, things that can make a difference, feels like something that would be worth doing. So probably I'm still involved in value-based healthcare work, so probably a bit of that. If there is an opportunity to support the Welsh finance community around development or helping people, share experiences, sort of support people, then definitely that as well, really.
Before we wrap this up, I just wondered, Alan, if there's any messages or any sort of final words maybe that you want to send to any former colleagues who I'm sure will look out for this podcast.
Just to say to them all, Mark, a huge thanks. I've been fortunate to work with a lot of talented people, but a lot of sort of kind, genuine, helpful people who've helped me along the way, and have been a real pleasure to work with. And just hope that all of them are enjoying good health and happiness, really, Mark. And and those who are still in work, keep up the good work. And there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Alan, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. Been an absolute pleasure to take a trip down memory lane for you as well, and spend some time. So I really enjoyed that. To everyone listening in, thank you for choosing HFMA Talk. As I said at the start, if you're enjoying listening to this new In Conversation series, please spread the word, as well as subscribing to the HFMA Talk podcast on your podcast app. And if there's anyone you'd like me to have a conversation with, then also drop me a line, get in touch via policy@hfma.org.uk. Until then, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the summer, and I'll speak to you again. All the best.